Welcome to Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety, where we talk about the real issues out on the road, focus on safe driving, and learn industry best practices from your hosts Kenny Ray, Mike Bohan, Jim Seibert, and Barry Harrison, and the hopes that by driving the line, we get more drivers home safe and sound. This podcast is made possible by Marsh McLennan Agency.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety. I am your podcast host today, Jim Seibert. I am joined by Kenny Ray and Mr. Barry Harrison, my two friends and colleagues, co-workers in this life of safety. We got a topic that we've talked about in the past, but we're going to join some other topics with it today because it seems like seasonally they align well. And so we're going to have a free-for-all and cover quite a few things. We're going to talk about school zones, new teenagers on the road, and it's coming up on fall harvest. I know that we've got wheat harvesters cruising, those custom harvesters. They're all over the country right now. I've got personal friends that are up in the Panhandle in Nebraska, cruising into South Dakota. I know that they're headed west of here, where I'm at in Oklahoma, and there's a lot of crops getting cut right now, not to mention hay season and bales that may or may not be tied down. Barry, I'm pointing a finger at you.
Never would I ever.
Bales that may or may not be tied down and secured, because we're only moving them from the field 5 miles from the house. I only got to do 2 or 3 miles of highway. So without further ado, gentlemen, many times we've talked about distracted driving, and we focus a lot about the actions of the driver. Sometimes we fail to talk about the other people, the pedestrians, that are not paying attention. And all that driver can do is react to what's in front of them, assuming that they're paying good attention. I got my son. My son is turning 13 next month. And he is chomping at the bit to get that farm permit that his sister got. And they're two different individuals, right? You got two different kids. One's responsible. One would walk into a wall if you weren't looking out for him, pointing them in the right direction. And they got these distractions. So real quick around the room, hey, when you're walking across city streets, when you're moving from one event to another, what are you thinking about when you're walking?
Well, Jim, I'll pick up first. And everybody knows that listens to our podcast. I'm the old guy on our team. And I'm going to tell you not to be arrogant and certainly not to sound holier than thou. But I'm not of the generation that walks down the sidewalk looking at my cell phone. I don't do that. I practice what I call situational awareness. I want to know what's going on around me. But I realize that each day that passes, I'm more of an anomaly because the majority of people I see walking down the sidewalk, they're holding their cell phone and looking at it or scrolling or texting. And number one, I'm not even coordinated enough to do that. But, you know, you're talking about people outside of the vehicles, pedestrians. That is a dangerous combination, just to be walking around near motor vehicles and not be paying attention if you're a pedestrian. But you said something else that I want to pick up on, and I want both of y'all's ideas on this because y'all are both really, really bright guys. You talked about seasonal changes. I have thought back over the year, you know, and all four, well, Mike too, Mike's not with us today, but all three of us that are on today, we were raised in rural areas, and seasonal changes always meant something related to agriculture. But seasonal changes also tremendously affect driving and traffic patterns. And, you know, here we are, we're transitioning from the summer into the fall, and school's going to be starting back. And I know you're wanting to talk about school zones and school buses and extracurricular activities and team drivers and all of those things happen. But you think about the 4 seasons we have. If you start at the first of the year chronologically, which is still right smack dab in the middle of winter, we're talking about winter driving and everything that's associated with being on ice and icy conditions and short daylight hours. When we talk about the spring, we're talking about people getting spring fever. They're ready for the winter to be over. They're wanting to be outside more. The days are starting to get longer. We have a change of daylight savings time. We move into summer. People are going on vacation. They're not paying any attention to what they're doing. And now we're talking about the transition from the summer into the fall. And I know the two things you're going to lead us on today is talking about this whole idea about back to school and everything related to that, and the changes that take place in our ag sectors because of the change of the seasons. And again, the three of us never ever lose sight of the fact that this is a trucking podcast, and so our audience primarily professional truck drivers. And so, ladies and gentlemen that are listening to our podcast, and Jim's going to lead us, I know, through a very interesting discussion of this, but we're just, the whole purpose of this podcast is to refresh your memory that with the change of seasons, you're fixing to start seeing different vehicles on the road. You're going to see school buses. You're going to see kids around schools. You're going to have very inexperienced teen drivers that just got their driver's license and are getting to drive to school. And you're going to see farm equipment out on some of these rural highways that you haven't seen in a few months because it's time for them to be back out with that. So it just reminded me, Jim, when you said the word seasonal, how profound that really is directly correlated to the movement of traffic on public highways. And I don't think we can ever lose sight of that. You know, it's not just the change of weather, it's significant changes to everything we do in the safety world.
Yeah, Kenny, you nailed it. I appreciate you adding in there. Barry, do you have a highway that goes right smack dab through the middle of Fairfax?
We do. And, you know, I've heard from you on multiple occasions that it may not be the smoothest of highways. Here through through Fairfax, you know, it's Highway 18, and yes, it runs right smack dab that we call Highway 18 Main Street here, and that's where, you know, the town was set up around it, and you see all those beautiful old buildings that sit downtown, and so yes, we do. We have a State Highway 18 runs right smack dab through the middle of Fairfax.
And this is off my script, that question, because Kenny really put some good thoughts into my head. Morrison, Oklahoma has Highway 64 that rolls right through as well. And we've got multiple oversized loads, multiple farmers, multiple 18-wheelers delivering produce and groceries and fuel and these wind turbines and you name it, everything that keeps America running is delivered on a truck, and they've got to get through these small communities. And so I think a pretty good overlap here is these small towns do not necessarily have adequate infrastructure. They don't necessarily have adequate signage, adequate road markings. They may or may not have definitive crosswalks anywhere along the line. But yet in my hometown here, I've got an elementary school on the south side of Highway 64, and then the high school is on the north side. And event centers are on multiple sides, and throughout the day, children will be being escorted back and forth across as the time of the day changes. And so this is not a city thing. This is school buses are stopping on the edges of highways and putting out their red stop sign and reflectors. And the unfortunate thing is sometimes they're just up over the next hill.
Yeah.
And they're just around the next bend. And they're not always in a perfect spot. And so being aware of the time of day you are passing through these areas is first and foremost. And number two that comes to my head is realizing that even though these youngsters may not be like driving through a college town or a city where everybody's plugged into their stuff and eyes glued on screens, or they've got their big old headphones pumping music into their head, these youngsters are not aware of what's going on at all times. And so they may have something on their mind of getting home and playing ball in the backyard, or getting home and seeing what mama or dad's got for a snack for after school. Just awareness around them and the new changes that they're going to be feeling as they're 1 year older going back to school. And maybe that comes with new freedoms. New drivers. I alluded to it just a few minutes ago, but you are absolutely going to be coming up on new drivers. And I know state laws are different, and we've discussed. My daughter, Evie, 14 years old with her farm permit, in a Jeep that max speed goes 50. At 50 miles an hour plus, it starts to feel like a spaceship taking off. So 50 is her speed limit. Imagine driving an 18-wheeler down a 65-mile-an-hour 2-lane highway with no shoulder coming up on somebody up over the hill. And so awareness around that, dealing with the frustration that you've got time hacks to make, and encountering somebody that's just driving slower, you know that's going to happen, and they're going to make some mistakes as they're learning to drive as well. Any more comments on the school zones and the new drivers, guys?
Yeah, I mean, Jim, this question's more kind of for you, but and it's tongue in cheek, I'll say it, but like with the headphones you mentioned, the big over the ear headphones, when did those come back? Because it seemed like we had them as kids, and then we went to the small little earphone, and now it's like we want this whole thing that covers the whole ear, where I mean, and I've had them on and you cannot hear a thing. Yeah. And these kids are pumped going back to school, walking down the road, and like I said, you can't hear anything out of it. They've got the noise canceling technology, and that bass is bumping, and they're having a good old time. And it just I was telling you guys before we got on that I've been to Stillwater, where Jim and I went to college, and I was trying to show my kids the campus and just how beautiful it is. And we went right down the middle of campus, and but I was quick to tell my girls, now look at how everyone is walking, and they aren't paying any attention. And that really, really hit me and resonated with me, because I'll be honest with you guys, and I'm sure you're kind of the same way. When I go into areas like that, I think, especially me, I think about when I was driving an 18-wheeler trying to deliver fuel or anything else into those packed communities. So I guess, my question still remains, when did those come back?
Well, I'll answer that a little bit with a story here. We had a 1986 Ford Tempo, and it was brown, and it was a manual transmission, and the radio went out. And so I had a Walkman, and I would drive around with the Walkman earbuds in, and I remember it was the Marshall Tucker Band tape in there. And because my dad watched me from the kitchen window, walked out, and he said, "You cannot have anything that interferes with your hearing, your audio capability. You got to listen to your vehicle. You need to listen for horns." And he took that and he kept it for like a week, but then he said, "Hey, good music selection though." So you bring that up, and it's a further distraction, and the word deliberate kept popping into my head when you were talking. And Kenny is one of the most deliberate people that I know when it comes to his stance on safety. Sometimes my farming background creeps up to haunt me and show its ugly face a little bit. When I say Kenny is deliberate, his world revolves around safety, and he focuses on the actions that he is taking. And even when he mentioned, he keeps 360 awareness when he is walking somewhere. That's also for a safety of others, and that comes with him being a protector, a server of civilians, and that's in him. And so when I think of being deliberate, yeah, no headphones when I'm driving. Don't care what the radio's doing. When I'm making a crosswalk, I'm choosing it's time to put the phone in my pocket. It's time to, I need to hear, because I could probably hear a motorcycle or a car coming down the road, but I can't, even if for some reason I'm not, visually aware. So being deliberate in the actions and a little bit of coaching, but it's tough to coach some older teenagers, some college kids that have already got all of life figured out yet, or they've got it. But I can start with my kids,
Yep.
start with yours, and every opportunity I have to speak at the school about farm safety, about driver safety, I'm going to take those opportunities, because if we can, we've had like 4 or 5 wrecks this year, teenage kids. And one of my friends was involved in one of the wrecks with one of the teenagers from school. It's got a profound impact on a community. And so,
no doubt.
deliberate with our intentions and deliberate with our actions and the deliberateness of what we communicate.
I'm tickled to death that you two guys talked about those headphones and distractions and all that, because, and Barry, you're the one on our team that's got a CDL. I think about our professional truck drivers out there. I think about our safety directors that are thinking about, what can I talk about at my next safety meeting or whatever. And, if you distill all this down, kind of a core thesis of the things y'all have been talking about is the kids that are around these schools and the kids that are getting on and off school buses and the kids that are walking around with these high-tech earphones on, they're not paying attention. So professional truck drivers have just got to realize, in fact, I distill it down to an equation. If you see a school bus equals small children. You see a school equals children. And children don't pay attention. And so our professional truck drivers, when you see a school bus, you just need to think, it doesn't matter if that bus is empty and a maintenance guy is driving it. You just need to think there's children. School bus equals kids. School zone equals kids. And I know in Oklahoma, it's just like Texas. High school football is a religion. And Friday nights, y'all are talking about these highways that run through these small towns. You're going to have a Friday night football game. There's going to be different traffic patterns in and out of that school as people are coming in. You've got school buses carrying band kids. You got school buses from the visiting team that's coming in. And, Jim, it goes back to what you're talking about, these seasonal changes. Both of you guys are avid college football fans, and I am too. And we know the fall, that means college football. It also means high school football. And every Friday night in Texas, you can be 15 miles from a town and you'll see the glow of the lights from the football field, okay? Because there is a Friday night football field, a Friday night football game. So, if y'all ask me, describe in just a very few words what this session ought to be about, I would say this: schools equal kids. And truck drivers need to be aware of kids.
Yep.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Being aware of the hazard that is present is what kind of kept resonating to me, and it sounds a little kind of dark to say that kids can be hazards, but I mean, to Kenny's point, to Jim's point, to my point, they don't always pay attention and they can be a hazard for you. So yes, please slow down and be aware of that hazard that's present.
And before we leave this topic, all three of us were raised in rural areas. And I'm just going to guess. I've never asked either one of y'all this question, but I'm going to guess at some point when all three of us were little boys, and I realize for me that was a long time ago, my guess is every one of us was on a school bus at some point in our life, okay? Now, here's where I'm going with this. As we go into this fall seasonal change, the days are going to start getting shorter. And if you take some of these rural areas, some of the kids that live farthest from the school, the ones that are picked up very first and are dropped off very last, some of those kids get picked up 6 a.m., 5:45 in the morning. Yep. And I don't know how many times, and y'all have done it too, you've been driving down a 2-lane road at 5:30, 5:45, 6 in the morning. We're going to an appointment somewhere, and you come around a curve, and there's 3 or 4 little kids standing in a driveway in the pitch dark, And my heart always just races and says, golly, I'm so glad that little boy didn't run out in the road, because I was on him before I even saw him, because they're just standing there, because they do that every single morning. They're not afraid of the dark. That's their driveway, and they're waiting on their school bus. But if I'm ahead of their school bus, I come around a curve and my lights illuminate these little children. And we're talking about little kids, kindergarten, 5-year-olds. I mean, they're little bitty dwarfs, you know, and they're just standing there on the side of the road. And it almost breaks my heart to think about what the tragedy could be there if a driver wasn't paying attention and drove off the highway and hit those kids. It just is a disaster beyond description.
Well, Kenny, you're talking to one of the guys. I was that knothead kid that I was the first one picked up in the morning, and I was going to be the last one to get off. And I was on about 6 or 6:15 every morning. I got on the bus and I rode it for about an hour every day. And to your point, I remember vividly as a young kid, you know, Dad would have the nurse tank in the yard because, you know, he's plowing or whatever, and just standing down there at the end of the driveway. And I lived on a very busy country road. It's a back road to Ponca City is what everybody calls it. And you talk about people fly. And
yeah.
It was evident to me. Luckily we had a pipe fence that ran all the way around the property, and I just made it common practice, because after a couple conversations with my mom and dad, you know, because I'd like to throw some rocks across the road every now and then and do little knothead stuff. They finally told me, you know, you will stay behind this fence until Charlie Parker, my bus driver, would pull up, and then I could proceed and do it. But it took them a couple times telling me, and then finally realizing just how dangerous it really was. And you got to think, this is in the heart of harvest.
Yeah.
You know, so they're pulling weed out, they're pulling everything out, and I'm seeing trucks just, you know, fly by because they've got to make several loads that day. They're going to the co-op and getting on with it. And
no doubt.
You brought up harvest, so I think that's a good transition here. But before we slip over, I do want to give that nice shout out to Charlie Parker for putting up with you for all those years. And then I also want to say, my driveway, I had to walk uphill both ways to the end of it in the snow.
Oh, okay? You're that guy that
Yes,
had that driveway.
Yeah, yes, sir.
The one that defies physics.
Yeah. All right. Well, ag. Gentlemen, I was just over at the Texas Cattle Feeders Association, their summer event in, what was it called? Inn of the Mountain of the Gods. I think I said that right, but just west of Roswell, New Mexico, about 90 miles west of there, a little town called Muscalero. So I was coming back from that trip, and somewhere in between Amarillo and the great state of Oklahoma, I ran into, on a little 2-lane highway, I ran into a combine that was hauling its own header on a trailer. I was going with the flow of traffic. Everybody comes to a standstill, and we're coming up over a hill. And they believe that since that thing's only going 25 miles an hour, everybody and their dog thought that it was okay to pass going up a hill. Not to mention, we didn't have a shoulder. So half the time, this combine is straddling, they're left of center, or they got their dualies on the front sticking over, and they're dodging mailboxes and they're dodging reflectors. And this farmer is just trying to get to the next field. So I got a couple vehicles in front of me, and they pass safely. Well, when I got up to the back side this is a newer, I don't think we can say brands. I'll just say it was John Deere Green, so I didn't say the brand. But I'm behind this pretty new combine with a pretty nice header on it, and all I can see is one light flashing. But they had their warning triangle up, warning triangle on the back of the header trailer, and all I can see is that one flasher, because I can't get over far enough on the right to see, are these hazards or is he signaling? And then people we're on the top of the hill, and people start passing me going down, passing me from behind. Well, I didn't have my passing. I didn't have my change lane signal on, so they were just doing what they were doing. I ended up stuck behind this person as I was trying to figure out whether it was a blinker or if it was the hazard because I couldn't see it. And I know from experience in the agronomy world that left-hand turns have caused the most incidents between the regular four-wheel vehicle and those tractor implements because they're just turning to the next field or the next country road. Well, like I said, I was stuck back there for about 30 minutes as I was trying to figure it out because I was thinking in my head, I've had many opportunities, but here's another driveway into a field. Here's another gravel road. I don't want to join that statistic, so let me just see what's going on. Ended up getting a perfect spot, nobody coming to pass. But I had to remove my own need to rush. I had to remove the hurry out of what I considered to be a successful trip, right? There wasn't a time I had to be home. I wasn't racing a clock. But when I'm on the road, I just want to get home.
Yeah.
No, I want to get home as fast as possible. Instead of as fast as safely, well, I try to drive the speed limit. But if I'm getting pressure, sticking with the speed, the speed of traffic, that's sometimes the safest thing you can do. And I think of driving through Houston and 10, 15 lanes across, that's crazy. And you are a hazard if you're going 30 under the speed limit. But
no doubt.
This little incident that's so recent, I felt it worth sharing. That I'm not saying I did everything right. I probably annoyed a lot of people, but no crashes happened. I'm hoping that the producer, that farmer that was in the vehicle, got safely wherever they were going. And I'm thankful that I had a moment of clarity to just say, well, try to stink and verify. Try to catch that piece of farm machinery in between driveways or in between county roads. Because I know he ain't turning to ramp through the ditch and hop that barbed wire fence to get in that field. Now I'm pretty sure he ain't turning left or she ain't turning left. So that equipment, some tractors can get up to 35, 45 miles an hour now. That's a heck of a lot better than they used to be. It speeds up a little bit. But my caution to those listening, 18-wheelers are long and they can't stop on a dime. If you see something over the horizon that's a farm piece of machinery, I know that you know this. I've got to say it. You got to slow down and pick your timing well. And realize that the left-hand turns, that percentage is so high. The left-hand turns, it never ends well for the four-wheeler. And I'm sure that it's catastrophic if it involves an 18-wheeler passing.
You did such a good job describing that experience. I could just see it in my mind. I got a mental picture of that. And I know what you drive. And again, we don't name brands on here, but you drive a vehicle that probably weighs 4,000, 4,500 pounds. It'll accelerate pretty well on its own. And still you had to wait till an opportune time to get around that combine. Now imagine if you're driving something that's 70 feet long and weighs 80,000 pounds and it does not accelerate well. Pulling out and trying to get around that combine, and Barry, again, you're our professional driver. That's a no-win situation unless you've got a designated passing lane where that highway widens up and gives you a spot. I want to encourage our truck drivers listening, just stay behind that piece of farm equipment till he turns. You are not going to be able to get around him safely.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really neat to me that we get to kind of marry these two topics because, Jim, to your point of when you see that in the road and you're not sure, I would caution every one of our professional drivers to, especially if you're somewhere where you're not familiar with, if you see a school bus driving down the road, you should act the same way because you don't know when that next bus stop's going to come. Mm-hmm. It's the same as that tractor that you're not sure when he's going to turn. and it's not worth the 10 minutes, the 5 minutes you're going to save by getting around them. It's just
Yeah,
not.
no doubt. No doubt.
We're a little bit a ways from corn harvest. I tell you what, this corn, this weather, things are growing like apps. It's just insane. The amount of rain that at least I've had, and they're calling for 11 more inches just this week. I've already had over 30 since April, and I don't mean to boast. There is such a thing as too much rain and too little rain, but this corn harvest is fastly approaching, and I'm not going to ask you to admit it, Barry. Right? You've hauled a heavy load or two. I'm not going to ask you to say what it was or what your number is, but when I hear or used to see farmers pull across the scale at 110, 115,000 pounds, grossly overloaded.
And those, let me tell you, as a guy on here that has weighed trucks for a living, those aren't always just going from the field to the elevator. I used to catch southbound Oklahoma grain haulers headed to the Port of Houston, and I've got a zillion of them over 100,000 pounds on a U.S. highway and an interstate, and on top of that, running 80, 85 miles an hour. So. Yeah, them Oklahoma grain haulers, you boys have quite a reputation up there. And,
Getting paid by the ton, you gotta.
So I bring that up to say, my uncles and I grew up. They didn't let me drive the fun stuff. I just drove a lot of straight trucks, hydraulic straight dump trucks. Tough to overload those, by the way, but. You professional drivers, you are, and it doesn't have to be a tractor, doesn't have to be that old square body truck that's hauling 3 anhydrous tanks that have a serpentine effect going down a highway, probably 30 miles an hour faster than they need to be driving. Watching out for that grain truck that's obviously a grain truck, you can make an assumption, and I'm not going to pigeonhole all of them. Kenny, you just affirmed something that I've been trying to share. I mean, we got the Port of Catoosa here. We got grain that's getting moved all over. And as these ag folks have said, if I want to stay profitable, I want to make that money. Sometimes my local co-op down the county road ain't the right thing for me to do. I'll make a significant margin per bushel if I haul it, and I'm hauling it into the city. I'm hauling white corn to the tortilla factory. I'm hauling grain farther than I ever have with these. I'd like to call them better. They're better trucks than they used to have. But Kenny, you've seen them. These guys pulling over. These are farm trucks and pre-trips and all of that other stuff. The ag community, farmers. A lot of them don't fall under the same regulations. Kenny, am I accurate?
Yeah, that's true. There's usually restrictions on it in terms of distance from the farm and a certain kind of license and those sorts of things. But there's no doubt during harvest season you're going to find trucks that are out of compliance with the law. That's just the fact of life. But you mentioned about loading in the field and going to the elevators. It also reminded me. And you talk about corn harvest. We are actually already harvesting corn in South Texas. It'll move up y'all's direction pretty quick. But a lot of times those fields are still muddy. And when they're coming out on the road, if you're driving in that area, there's liable to be mud on the road. And y'all have seen it. I mean, we're talking about chunks sometimes. It's as big as a cinder block. And if it sits out there in that sun and bakes, before long, it's hard as concrete. And that'll tear past your car all to pieces. So there's all sorts of hazards. And again, Jim, we never ever practice or do a rehearsal on these podcasts. And I'm just tickled to death that you started this off talking about seasonal changes, because here we've talked about the change with kids around schools. We've talked about the changes because of the ag harvest that's starting to come in. And again, to our professional truck drivers and our safety directors, we ask that our drivers be aware of these things. Hey, schools equal kids, school buses equal kids. Farming means hazards out on the highway. And Mr. and Miss Safety Director that listen to our podcast, take these topics and use them as well with your safety talks and your toolbox talks with your drivers. So super intro into this topic. I'm just tickled to death you started off talking about seasonal changes, because that is so and along with that, I want you to think about this, and we've done an entire topic on this before, but we're talking about going into the fall, and any of our listeners that run to west to the mountain states, September 1, Colorado chain laws kick in. Mm-hmm. They may not have any snow or ice yet, but you've got to have chains on that truck, not on the tires. You just have to have the chains with the trucks. And it's basically, you take the Rocky Mountain area, you start at New Mexico and go to Colorado and go into Wyoming, Montana, and then everything west of there, Utah, Washington State, Oregon, Northern California, they've all got chain laws. And, we're just around the corner from that, talking about snow chains and chain laws. And daylight savings time is going to hit us, and days are going to get very short, and it's going to still be dark in the morning and get dark at 5:15, 5:30 in the evening. So, there's a bunch of hazards. Again, I'm just tickled to death you started off talking about seasonal changes, because it profoundly impacts driving.
One thought closing out here, Kenny, I think you led into a closing here pretty good. And the final thought that I want to share about ag stuff is be aware and be deliberate about the speed mismatch of the typical ag equipment coming out of a field compared to how fast you can go in your 18-wheeler, and out. I'm just comparing to there's a lot of families, a lot of kids, a lot of people driving little farm trucks around getting to the next field as well. We would love to hear from you. If you've been a long-time listener and or a brand new listener, and anything we talk about, something pops up into your head, you want us to elaborate further on. You want to bring something up to our attention. You want to share a story. There's a link that are on all these podcasts. Drop a question. I know that these podcasts also get put on a YouTube channel. You can make a comment there and we'll catch it. And we'd love a little bit of interaction. So for us at Driving the Line, I want to thank you for listening and joining today. And we will look forward to the next time we get to visit. And you get to hear us country boys crack up a little bit. And we will catch you on the next episode.
That's all the time we have for this edition of Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and thank you for listening. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or any other app you're using. You can also follow Marsh McLennan Agency on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Until the next time, thanks again for listening. Drive safely, everyone.